Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Jeff Reinke. He's the Director of Content and Audience Engagement at Industrial Media and the co-host of Today in Manufacturing and the Security Breach podcast. With over 20 years of experience in creating and managing strategic content in the B2B marketplace, he has served audiences in the automotive, manufacturing, medical, and product development industries. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get a little bit of your backstory. How'd you get into the world of manufacturing?
Well, I'd like to say there's some real dramatic calling that I felt, but honestly, it was a job. um, working in media, there's opportunities to grow and elevate. And I was actually working for a company where I was focused on the automotive aftermarket, which was awesome. I've always loved cars and tools and stuff like that, and it was a great fit personally, and had an opportunity to sort of grow and manage a couple different brands in the manufacturing sector. That was about 20 years ago. And yeah, it's been great. It's been an amazing industry to be a part of. It was something that allowed me to maybe bond with my dad a little bit more. He was a tool and die maker for about 40 years. So definitely something that was always very close to our family and part of our natural conversation, I guess you could say. So it's been a great experience, and looking forward to continuing to be a part of, what I always felt is such an important industry. So
Yeah, I love it. And those happy accidents are A-okay. That's I
yeah,
stumbled my way into the construction technology space and haven't looked back. So I think
excellent.
happy accidents are put you where you're meant to be for sure.
There you go.
Well, let's dive into some of the issues facing manufacturing. So, like the construction industry, the labor shortages is really pressing in on manufacturing. Can you shed some light on the magnitude of the problem, why it's so concerning, and then what are some kind of primary factors leading to this growing labor gap in manufacturing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the skills gap concerns they've been going on in the trades for a while. Manufacturing is a big part of that, obviously.
Mm,
So I think it's as far as leading to the issue, it's been sort of this disillusionment with manufacturing as a career path, which is really unfortunate because in a lot of cases it takes into a lot of factors that just aren't accurate. Manufacturing factories aren't these dungy, poorly paying, dirty jobs that people maybe have a bad preconception of. I mean, there's so much technology that's going on. There's so much opportunity for growth and personal development within the industrial sector that it's unfortunate that some of these stereotypes have sort of withheld some really promising talent from seeking it out. And I think that's permeated into high schools and tech schools and other places as well. Whereas opposed to looking at manufacturing and those types of positions as a real growth opportunity for people, they've shied away from them or maybe steered people away from entering or going down that road. And as a result, we do have a huge, significant challenge ahead of us in terms of trying to fill all these new positions within manufacturing. And a lot of these jobs do call for a really unique skill set, an advanced skill set. We need folks that understand, baseline electronics, that understand robotics and programming, and understand and are familiar or comfortable working with this type of technology. And again, I think there's a lot of people out there. They don't always understand or realize that these opportunities are present within a lot of the factories here in the U.S. And I think that's the biggest challenge we have, which is also an opportunity, quite honestly, and getting out and sort of selling ourselves a little bit in the manufacturing sector and just talking about all these awesome opportunities that there are with all this new technology that's being utilized.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, the interesting thing there is that it's a cultural issue and
Yeah.
phenomenon that's going on to overcome those misconceptions and those stereotypes. How does the manufacturing industry that, as you said, it requires very technical skill set? How does the manufacturing industry play in the cultural uh, mind share, if you will, to
Yeah.
overcome the misconceptions and the stereotypes?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mentioned before my dad was a tool and die maker for all those years, and I think he was very happy that when he saw my siblings and I not necessarily go down that track in terms of following his path into manufacturing, he was happy because he came from a situation where a lot of those workers, were not always taken we're not taken advantage of a little bit in terms of
Mhm.
what they were expected to do and long hours and coming in on weekends and extra shifts and all of those things. And I think that's changed, but we still have some of the former generation maybe thinking about it within that construct.
Mm.
And we need to change that. We need to get out in front of people and just offer them a different perspective. Get them in some of these factories that are just pristine. They're gorgeous when you walk through them, and you can see how, as opposed to maybe my father's generation, employees are much more heavily involved in decisions that are made on the plant floor. They can see there's so much more visualization in terms of performance indicators and things of that nature that really help those on the factory floor understand the big role that they play and the prominent role that they play, not just in that facility, but the enterprise. And if you want to get really, not to sound too dramatic, but really in everything everybody experiences every day. I mean, there's nothing that's not manufactured that you use. And so much more of it now is coming from places here in the US, coming from workers that are getting, ideally, continuing to get a better wage, better benefits, more job opportunities. So it's breaking down some of those stereotypes, which is hard,
Mhm.
but it's really just getting in front of people and showing them this isn't like it used to be. There is a new face on U.S. manufacturing, and it's all super positive.
Mhm. How do you peel back the curtain there to create or give people exposure to it? Because not everybody's you can't take the manufacturing plant to
Yeah.
on a road show. It's a stationary thing. So how do you give the exposure to people of those pristine, beautiful, well lit environments that manufacturing facilities are now?
Well, we see a lot of plants really opening up and offering tours to the public. I mean, granted, maybe metalworking isn't always the most glorious thing to look at, but some of the food plants, that are kind of fun to go through, and people can
Yeah.
get an appreciation then. So I think some facilities have done that. I think we've got some real champions when you look at some of the stuff that's been going on with like the FIRST organization with robotics and getting some of the younger high school students more heavily involved. Here with some of the manufacturing extension programs, the MEP programs that kind of go from state to state, they do some really cool stuff in terms of like holding drafts, so that some of these organizations that are looking for summer help or entry level workers, they're looking through and they're holding, it's almost like going to the NFL draft. They're saying, hey, we're picking these folks to come on board and we're excited to have them part of the team.
Mhm.
In addition to that, I think it's working not just with the general public, but with guidance counselors and some of these other individuals, teachers in high schools, and getting them to come into the facilities and talking to them, really being more proactive and playing a bigger role within the communities and understanding, look, we're not just that cement building at the end of the street. We're engaged. We're part of a bigger picture here that you guys can also be involved with. It's not an easy process. It's going to be slow going, but it's going to be worth all of that pain in the long run because not only are we going to get people in there, but we're going to get highly qualified people filling these positions, which
Mhm.
makes us more competitive globally.
Mhm. So to kind of paint a dollar picture to this, Deloitte suggests that we might see a shortage of over 2 million workers by 2030, which is it's not that far away, and that could result in an opportunity cost of $1 trillion annually. In your view, what can be done now to really prevent this kind of bleak projection and change the tide?
Well, and I wish I had the silver bullet. If I had the exact answer,
You might be
I'd
pocketing
be
that
I'd be
trillion
doing pretty
dollars.
well. Yeah, right. But I think a lot of it is again being proactive. I think it manufacturing has a tendency to say, and I'm oversimplifying here, but saying, "Hey, we've got these job openings. Why don't you guys come on board and check it out?" It's got to be more than that, and
Mhm.
it's also looking internally. There's a lot of individuals that have been on that plant floor and have so much organic experience that they can be trained to do different things. Because what we want to do is we want to embrace automation, but that shouldn't be the way to solve the skills gap. And I think that's what a lot of people see as well is sort of a misperception within the industrial sector. We're getting cobots and robots and more of this type of technology implemented within manufacturing. We still need a lot of people when it comes to quality control, when it comes to being on there to make sure that the cobots and robots are doing the right things and doing them safely.
Mhm.
So it's a combination, I think, of really taking advantage of the talent that we do have internally within these facilities, but then also being much more proactive and engaging people as they're looking at what to do in high school, what they're looking when they're coming out of tech schools, and just presenting it as a very valid job path and career path, especially when you see the increases in pay that have really been stimulated over the last 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm. So you bring up an interesting uh, argument that a lot of people come at when you talk about technology and stuff, and that they feel that kind of threat looming that
Yeah.
the tech is coming for their job, or they're gonna implement this tech and it's just to get rid of all the work staff. I don't believe that. I think that's another huge misconception in the technology thing. It's a partnership there. But how do you speak to those manufacturers that are looking in to bring technology, but also want to ease the concerns of their workers that are doing really cool things?
Well, and this is easy for me to say, right? Because I'm sitting here, I'm not sitting in on a plant floor right now. But when this is done correctly, when automation and robotics are done the right way, they're not eliminating jobs. They're allowing the enterprise to grow,
Mm-hmm.
and they're eliminating a lot of jobs that not jobs, but roles or duties within the facility that can be unsafe, that can be monotonous, that aren't really that highly sought after.
Mm-hmm.
So really, when you're bringing robotics and increased automation into a facility, you're allowing the facility and the enterprise to utilize all that talent much more effectively. So you're not going to have somebody who may have great programming skills, basically counting parts or grabbing something off the fork truck to bring it to the assembly line. You can use them in quality control. You can use them to run more complicated scanning equipment and measuring equipment to make sure that there's fewer recalls and there's fewer customer complaints. So really, it's taking advantage of that technology and utilizing it the way it should be, and then
Mm-hmm.
implementing that talent that you have from all that human capital and allowing them to do more. So really, again, there's no way of saying that it won't take away some of these jobs, but I think the better way to describe that is it's transforming a lot of these positions within these facilities, again, to utilize all those skills that right now are kind of going untapped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I more than agree with that. I think when technology is used and leveraged properly in its proper context, it takes the mundane functions out of a person's job and allows people to do what people do well, and that's critically think and come up with creative problem solving. With the tech can't uh, come up with the creative problem solving. It can give you an analysis of what the data is showing, but people are really good at the problem solving, not necessarily the computer. So if we put each other in our right perspective, then we can augment and really leverage each other's power a whole lot more effectively, for sure.
Absolutely.
Do you see any regions or sectors of the U.S. manufacturing industry that you feel are kind of taking all this and maybe doing better than other segments of it?
Well, it's interesting. We see so much going on in automotive right now, and I'll kind of step away from the big news, which is obviously the strikes and things like that, but just looking at what's going on kind of in what has been going on in the southeastern part of the country with the automotive aftermarket and all the production that's been going on down there. You see a lot of facilities or a lot of companies looking down south, looking at Georgia and Mississippi. South Carolina's got a huge automotive infrastructure. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because they're implementing a lot of this technology that not only allows them to build smarter, but also forecast better, which leads you to purchase better, which helps you to keep costs down and pay your workers well. So I think automotive is definitely a place where we've seen a lot of these technologies that implement smarter manufacturing approaches really utilized very effectively. So automotive is one. I think the other one is medical. When you look at all of the medical is so different because you're not dealing with the types of quantities that you would in other sort of mass production type environments. But when you think about medical manufacturing, these are big, big companies. And what they need to be able to do is very smartly and very, very efficiently produce probably smaller quantities of certain tools or surgical implants or whatever you might be the case. And through technologies like 3D printing and other additive manufacturing processes, they become a lot smarter. Then you throw in some robotics and some automation, and they're highly efficient to help preserve their costs. Again, pay their workers better, offer more stability within their communities and within their supply chains. Um, and the third one, I think that really comes to mind with that's been a little bit maybe slower in coming to the technology table is food and beverage. But during the pandemic, a lot of those facilities really understood that they were behind when it came to automation, and they've been investing very heavily. And as a result, ideally, we're getting more technology focused on safety, fewer recalls, fewer people getting sick from eating bad stuff, all that kind of stuff. And it also, when we think about a lot of those checks and balances that new technology can create, it's also about making sure that the right amount of product is being utilized, the ingredients are being sourced and used most effectively, and eliminating waste and things like that. So I think a lot of the technology there has just made us just more efficient, which is obvious, but also eliminating some of that waste that before was just sort of a cost of doing business. And again, the
Mhm.
better we are at eliminating those types of things, the better it is on the plant floor, better it is for the workers and the overall enterprise. So I think those are maybe some of the leading candidates that have really grabbed onto some of the new developments from a technology perspective.
Yeah, interesting. So, to kind of broaden out, one of the big buzzwords trends going on in the industry is all around Industry 4.0, which is taking all this tech and really being able to leverage that. Well, what does that entail
Yeah.
for you, and how is that helping to reshape the manufacturing industry?
Well, it's interesting because for a while it was the Internet of Things that was sort of the buzz term, and now we sort of
Yeah.
transitioned to Industry 4.0, and it's cool. I'm good with it. Whatever gets people excited about implementing technology and investing in it, I don't care what you call it. I'm all for it. So it's great. But I think the vast majority of these things have been around for a while. They're basically new iterations of different connected automation and different controls that we've just sort of, to borrow what's the movie where they turn it up to 11. All the basically that's what a lot of these what's going on right now. So it's just advancing the application in terms of just using it maybe in larger enterprises for very specific work cells. Now we're broadening how we can use a lot of this connected technology in terms of not just being more efficient in the production part of it, but also in the quality controls. And the bigger part of it, where the Industry 4.0, I think, dynamic really comes to play, is then integrating how we can share all of the data we're capturing to make our processes that much better. So being able to see all that different information, and it kind of goes back again to how we can utilize all that human capital that we have on the plant floor and all that great experience, showing them more of this information and making it more accessible allows them to make great decisions on the spot, which allows for better quality products, fewer issues, less waste, all of that. So the way that it's really been impacting in the greatest way, I think, again, is just broadening exposure to data, which does create some challenges, but also the bigger part of that just keeps me more people in the loop and being able to contribute on a higher level in terms of what the end product is.
Yeah, let's dive into the data aspect of it, because there's so much potential incoming data that you can
Yeah.
just get very quickly lost in this ocean of, of waves of data just crashing on you. How do you, as a manufacturer, kind of take all that and then categorize it, and being able to go to the data and really be able to uh, get useful insights into it instead of just drowning in data?
Yeah, it's all about whatever your analogy is. Don't try to drink the ocean, eat the elephant, whatever you want to say. It's really just about understanding what's most important to you on a very basic level. What is the data you really need to make good day-to-day decisions, and how do you share that most effectively with those that can take that insight and apply it most rapidly? So it's just starting at that baseline as opposed to, one of the big investments that a lot of companies have made really over the past decade or more is a lot of ERP software, because they
Mm.
see all the capabilities that are available and tying everything together, and it's amazing and it's wonderful, and you should, but don't start out trying to connect everything. Let's start out with what's most important and work outward from there, because when you try to narrow it down too much, you just get bogged down then with a lot of processes and you lose sight of what you're really trying to accomplish. So whenever we talk to a lot of these big automation partners or a lot of these big software providers, that's always their advice. Start with the basic stuff and work outward from there. And I think those that have not only become less frustrated with the process, but there's been a smoother integration and dynamic, which is the biggest concern for manufacturers when they do start implementing more software and more data driven platforms, is they're afraid that hey, at the end of the day, I need to get this material put together with this material and fastened and packaged and out the door. So don't slow me down too much in the production process while we're trying to integrate all this software and data gathering information. And I think that's where companies have gotten a lot smarter. I think the pandemic actually helped a lot there because they could take a step back or take a breath, if you will, and just think about what is the best way to do this, not just get it in, but what makes the most sense. And in doing so, it's again starting with the basic stuff and moving from there.
Hmm. So this may sound like a basic, obvious question, but how should companies take that step back to be able to identify what their basics and what is most important to them?
Well, I think it starts with a basic understanding of your company and your enterprise and what your goals are, and a lot of that comes from talking to people, your internal stakeholders.
Hmm.
I think sometimes when we talk about software integration and data visualization, we start with the boardroom and we start with folks in purchasing or supply chain. Get on the plant floor, talk to your operations people, talk to your shift managers, talk to those people that are on the line, and let them provide input as to what they need on a daily basis to do their job better. Let's not start at the highest level. Let's start right at the ground floor. One of the things with the people that I work with, they get absolutely sick of, and my wife and daughter probably do as well, is when I just talk about blocking and tackling. Get down to the basics. I understand we all like the Hail Marys and the 80-yard touchdown runs, but it starts up front. It starts with the stuff that may not be real pretty, but has to be solid. And in manufacturing, those are your plant floor workers.
Yeah, you're singing my language there. I see so many companies make the mistake of trying to implement technology to solve a problem that nobody asked to be solved, and that's
Very
it's
true.
not it's a kind of a boardroom.
Yeah.
They perceive it as the problem, but when you go to the field, they're like, "No, I don't care about that. This is what we really
Yeah.
need to solve." It. Getting those stakeholders aligned on the same page is critical to any technology implementation for sure.
Absolutely, especially when you're spending this much money. And I think that's where a lot of people get disillusioned when they start making these investments. Is to your point, they tried to solve a problem that wasn't really a problem, and in the meantime, the people who need to implement and use those tools, they're going, "I don't need this. I needed this.
Yeah,
This is what I
yeah.
needed," and because the
Yeah,
wrong
so they're not
investment was
bought in.
made, yeah, and it just sours the whole experience. And then we get companies that really need to continue making these investments in technology, not doing it. They don't become competitive. People get disillusioned, and never goes well from there. So
Yeah, agreed, agreed. Shifting gears a bit to kind of the industrialized cybersecurity, that's becoming a bigger, growing concern for sure. Can you highlight some of the latest cyber threats that manufacturers need to be aware of, and then what strategies are most effective in preventing and then mitigating these cyber risk for the manufacturing space?
Todd, it's funny. I go back to again. It's a lot of blocking and tackling. It really is for a lot of these cybersecurity issues. A
Hmm.
lot of it, when you even go back to like Colonial Pipeline, which got so many headlines with that being shut down and ended up being a Russian, ransomware group that got in there. They got in through
Hmm.
credentials that they were able to buy from basically the dark web that were probably not turned off as soon as they should have. A lot of people just not being diligent in securing their username and passwords. I mean, these are things that seem really, really simple, but just are so prominent. I mean, how many cubicles could you walk past and see people's username and password written on a post-it note stuck on the front of their monitor? These types of things happen. Plugging in USB devices into industrial, CNC machines or other things like that may have come from outside the organization. It's crazy, but it still happens. So a lot of those things are really the biggest issues, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. Lock up your credentials. Don't let any kind of foreign devices on the plant floor that could be compromised. Because bottom line is, you may have the best of intentions, Todd, when you come to my facility, but if you clicked on the wrong link in a Gmail on that smartphone that you're now using to access my automation platform, we're all done. you know, so it's checking a lot of
Right.
those very simple, straightforward boxes that probably account for just a wide variety of issues when it comes to credentials, logins, and then the other big one is obviously a lot of phishing attacks through email. People sending malicious attachments,
Mm.
links, even to higher level management, individuals who should know a heck of a lot better not to click on stuff. they are. And that just gives these criminals an inroad. And with a connected enterprise, we're talking about IoT and Industry 4.0, with everything becoming more and more connected. Through that email, I can get into your email. I can understand how to get into your network. I can steal a bunch of passwords that I can not only sell on the dark web to other people who want to get into your network, but I can use myself to shut things down or hold you for ransom. But again, a lot of those things,
Mhm.
they're real simple. The more complex issues deal with a lot of the integrations of new technology and the connection points that in our hurry to integrate the new technology, we didn't make sure those connection points were secure. And that's where the more advanced attacks tend to happen. But vast majority, it's just trying to make things
Mhm.
hard for the hackers. I've had more than one security professional tell me they'd rather log in than break in. I mean, if they can figure out a way to do that, that's what they're going to do. So
Yeah, absolutely. So with the rise of my my favorite topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning, how are these technologies being harnessed to bolster the industrial cybersecurity?
well, there's good and bad. I mean, it's like anything. When you look at artificial intelligence, especially, yeah, the bad guys can use this because it helps them to move so fast. Once they figure something out, they can plug in their AI and use that to write those phishing emails. They can use it to plug in the algorithms that they need to break in at these connection points, and they can do it so much more quickly. Once they figure out where to attack, what the vulnerability is, they can use AI to not only morph it, to hide
Mhm.
it, to make it different and help it evolve. The good news, though, the good guys, the white hats. We also have AI, and we can implement that from a security perspective as well to design our own algorithms and understand that the bad guys are going to be evolving and adjusting their approach or their language, and use that to set up better email security. Use that to set up better um, firewalls and other type of defense mechanisms or monitoring to set off alerts. Hey, if we see, one of the biggest things we'll see in the industrial sector is the tolerances that maybe an IT professional would look at and say, you know what, that's a spike of like a half a degree. What does that mean? On the OT side, that's huge. That's a big deal. So using AI to find those types of things that might be evidence of a hacker trying to probe your network and figure out what you're up to, that's where AI can really come in and identify really a whole new set of parameters for you to help advance your security approach. So AI,
Mhm.
it's a double-edged sword. The bad guys can use it, but the good guys can too.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. As we start to look at kind of landing the plane of the conversation here, uh, bridging the gap, a lot of what we talked about is some of the innovation happening in construction industry, but manufacturing has so many great best practices and innovations that construction can look towards, especially as construction and manufacturing, those lines are really starting to blur with
Yeah.
prefab and offsite and the industrialization of construction coming in your opinion, what kind of key lessons can construction professionals take away from the manufacturing industry?
Boy, I think the big one, and we've talked a lot about this already, but it's really sort of not taking for granted a lot of that inherent talent you may already have, on the site, in the facility, whatever, and really giving those individuals an opportunity to grow and develop and contribute on a greater level. One of the things we've struggled with in manufacturing is sort of a different generation entering the workforce that just approaches things from a different perspective. People want to talk about
Mhm.
them they don't want to work as hard, they're more sensitive. I don't really get that. I think they work differently and they're motivated differently, and you have to appreciate that. Being a
Mhm.
part of a team and understanding what your role is and how you're contributing to the end goal is a big part of the individuals that are coming into the workforce right now. And if you want to retain quality people, that becomes just as important as paying them well. They want to be trained, they want to learn more. And I think that's something we're continuing to learn in
Mhm.
manufacturing to retain so many of these good employees. Because right now, man, even if you're paying somebody at a factory $20 an hour, they can go to Starbucks and get that too. So if you want to keep them on site and you want to keep them contributing to your organization, some of these different motivations are really important in retaining them. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest things that manufacturing is trying to get better at, and maybe construction could learn hopefully more quickly than we have in terms of keeping those people and addressing some of those skills gap concerns.
Yeah, No, I think that's a good one. One of the things that comes up so much, I think, in the Gen Z coming into the workforce is wanting the sense of purpose with whatever company that they're going to work for. That they want to feel like they're doing more than just their job and their role in that the company is kind of being the the good uh, global citizen, kind of, if you will,
Yeah.
and has a real strong calling card and mission that they're charging towards.
Yeah, Todd, I think it just kind of bleeds into the fact that as always we've been a little bit more reactive in some of these areas, and we need to be more proactive. Not wait for a big customer to say, "Hey, what are you doing here in terms of introducing more robotics to your plant floor?" Or being more reactive in terms of bringing new people into the enterprise. Being more proactive in finding the right
Mm.
people, finding the right technologies, and implementing them as opposed to waiting for somebody else to do it and sort of copying what they're doing.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of crossover in many different ways with construction and manufacturing. uh, One of the main pillars of the show here is around innovation. What does innovation mean to you?
Whew. I think where it starts with me is just being open minded in terms of different ways to solve problems and not closing the door on any one thing. And I think we run into that. I think that's actually where one area where manufacturing is really good. Whenever we talk about a lot of the issues, we talked a lot about skills gap, cybersecurity, all of these things, they're real. They're big challenges and they're big problems. But the legacy of U.S. manufacturing has been that's our wheelhouse. That's what we do. We figure out ways to do things better. And I think that really starts with just there may not be the best answer. We always want the best answer, but there's no real wrong thoughts in identifying ways to either implement a different technology, a different process is really a big part of it. And that just comes from being open minded and not locking yourselves into, look, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're going to continue to do it, and we're going to try to continue to cram these round pegs into these square holes because this is what we are. Well, it's innovation is thinking outside of that and understanding there may be a better way to do something. When you look at something like 3D printing, have you ever thought you'd be 3D printing aerospace parts? There are now things like military units are going to have 3D printers as part of their tank battalion, so that they can print new parts for weaponry. It's incredible, and that doesn't come about if you don't first have the thought
Yeah.
of what's a better way we can have this stuff right here, right now, so that we can move, communicate more quickly. So I think it's innovation really starts with that thought process.
Yeah, I agree. More than agree with that. How do people find out more information on what you have going on and connect with you?
Yeah, we got manufacturing.net as sort of our flagship. So you can go there and sign up for our daily newsletters. Check out our podcast, Today in Manufacturing Podcast. We're extremely proud of that. I'm also associated with Manufacturing Business Technology, which is mbtmag.com, that website. And you can sign up for the Security Breach podcast there, which talks more about all these really interesting stuff we have going on with cybersecurity in the industrial sector. So, and you can always hit me up, Jeff at IEN.com as well.
Awesome. Very cool. Final question for you, Jeff. If I could give you all power and you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing, what would you pick to innovate?
Whew. Pick to innovate. Boy, so many things flowing through my head. I think the first thing that comes to mind, just because maybe we've been talking about so much, is just again sort of the well, a lot of it I think would go back to mindset and just getting people to appreciate different ways of doing things. And I know that's not it's not like saying, "Hey, I want to innovate and make electric vehicles easier to build, or smart or rare earth elements easier to source, or something like that." But again, I think it just starts with that open mindset of there's a lot of different ways to solve problems, and let's not just throw stuff out. So I think if we could just get past that, and again, dealing with people society wide, and just understand there's a lot of different ways of doing things, and just investigate more of these processes, I think that would help solve a lot of problems. So that would be my approach.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us on the show and opening up a ton of different conversations. I know we didn't go super specific into so many things that we could have. But thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, my pleasure, Todd. This was great. I love talking about this stuff. The crossover into the construction industry is always really intriguing. So appreciate the time and thanks for having me on.